morning. Good morning. Okay, good. There it is. Hey, as you can see, I'm super excited because Harry and I get a chance to team teach this morning as we enter into the first of 2 weeks of orientation, as it were, in preparation, as was alluded to during worship, our move across the street to a brand new facility. And yeah, that's real exciting. I hope we give you stuff to cheer about this morning. But all that's to say is that let me set the stage for where we're going, not only today, but over the next few weeks. But what we've envisioned as elders, staff, etc., is just like anything. And it really came because I was thinking about when my son Will went to UCA this year, and I went with him. And you know how it is, you go to a new college, and they went through this whole line of orientation. They had to talk to this person and that, and they had to go through this whole thing, look him in the eye, sign papers, etc. And then at the end, he got his reward, basically a card. You know, he's a member or whatever. He got his ID card from UCA, right? And so we were talking about that any big move in your life like that, often it's really good to be oriented, right? Because it's a whole new experience. It's a whole new day. And so we kind of use that as an analogy to say, boy, we need to take all of ourselves, the entire church, through an orientation, as it were, in order to give you your ID card to the new building, so to speak, and have fun with that. But seriously, to help our spirits, our souls, even as we physically prepare for this move, how to do that and to do it well. So with that said, what we've envisioned is this week and next week are kind of 2 orientation Sundays. Today, of course, Harry and I will team share, team teach, as it were. Next week, we'll have a small panel, and we'll do like a discussion from different people like Victor Davis or Tiffany and Mike Clowers and Raphael, and kind of a panel discussion from different areas of the church, and you'll get a chance to eavesdrop on that conversation and hear it. So in a sense, those are like requirements, okay? So if we could be so strict about this, we want every single member of the church to have been here for 2 Sundays and or to watch these online, right? So that's kind of the goal, and I'm telling you so you can tell others maybe they're not here. And then sometime over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to offer a variety of meeting times. Some will be Sunday morning, Sunday night, through the week, very convenient times. And we're asking every one of you to just pick one of those times, no more than 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour tops. But in that setting, in a kind of a small group setting, it's as if we want to get eyeball to eyeball with every single person in the church, right? And say, did you watch this message? Did you hear that? Do you have any questions? You understand what we're talking about? And in a sense, that's where you sign up, so to speak. And you say, I get it, I'm with it, I understand, and I'm excited to make the move across the street. So it's 2 Sunday mornings plus that small group meeting, and we thought that'd be a great way to orient the church after all these years here to a brand new experience. That sound good? All right, good. So we're trying to take it serious. I hope you do. It's a serious thing, not a serious a heart attack kind of serious, but real excited. Maybe I should say significant time and season in our life, right? So with that said, let me just jump right in and put up this slide. As you can see, 10 Sundays from now. Can you believe it? 10 Sundays from now, we will not be in this space. We will be across the street on January 3rd for our very first service in that new facility. Of course, January 10th we'll have a grand opening service, and then on January 17th, a move to 2 services, 9 and 10:45. So I can't believe after all these years, we're down to 10 Sundays, as it were. And as Harry and I were talking about this and looking back and reflecting, because you and I have been together about 13 years, I think. You came in October of 2002, right?
October 19th, to be exact.
Yeah, 2002.
But who's counting?
Yeah. So we got the church underway in June of 2001, so just over a year and a half. Harry's been the entire time, so about 13 years, I guess, or so we've been together. So we were reflecting on our whole experience with Mosaic over those years and all, and we really thought, there's probably a ton of analogy and metaphor with the journey of the Israelites, first out of Egypt and all those years of patience and wandering in the wilderness and learning and growing, and ultimately where they actually cross the river and take possession of that promised land. And in a sense, we're about to do the same thing, and not crossing a river or a sea, but we're crossing a street, right? To take possession of a building and literally 10 acres of land that God has gifted us. So we've been talking about there's so many metaphors and so many analogies related to that. For instance, in my own experience, I remember my burning bush moment, just me personally, when I was getting my hair cut over here with Precious Williams, and she asked me, Mark, do you ever think a church like this could happen? Do you ever think it could be possible? And I heard in my spirit in the moment, it wasn't so much a question, it was like God telling me, go get that done, go do it, I'm calling you to that. So I had my own personal burning bush moment, as it were, that got me started in this vision, this pursuit, right? I remember not long after that, sitting at Jimmy's Sandwich Shop over here on Markham and out in the parking lot, just screaming and crying out to God, like, what the heck have you got me doing? I was so scared. I didn't have money. I was looking at 2.5 months, no money after 2.5 months, and a family to support, and nothing more than a vision and a prayer. And I just got all panicky and concerned. And I remember it was that day the church received its very first financial gift, $50, that came from a man over at Philander Smith. And so God calmed my spirit. But just like Moses, I can't do that. And I had that experience as well, even personally, before we actually began meeting on July 8th of 2001. But beyond myself, of course, there's been the journey of our collective experience, right? The story, as it were, of Mosaic. And for those of you that are new, just really briefly, let me say, it was July of 2001 that we actually assembled people for the first time over at Markham Street Baptist, about 40 or 45 people in the room. And that was the very first Sunday we worshiped together, we prayed together, et cetera, and got off. And for the first 5 months of this church, we wandered. Every single Sunday, we were someplace different. In fact, sometimes it'd be late Saturday night, sometimes even Sunday morning, because for 2 years we met on Sunday nights, just trying to find a place we could meet. I knew a number of pastors around the city, so I'd say, hey, could I use your gym this week? Oh, you can't use it this week, but you can use it 2 weeks from now. And so we'd scramble to find places. In fact, in the early days, they called us the Stealth Church because nobody really knew where we were meeting from Sunday to Sunday for 5 months, and we try to get the word out. I mean, this was back in the days of AOL dial-up, right? So we did the best we could to try to let people know. But we were 5 months wandering, as it were, like that. And then we landed for 18 months right over here at Faith United Church. And so for about 2 years, that was our story. And then, of course, God, in the summer of 2003, we got this space. And what a miraculous story. I've told it before, but just briefly, I asked one year, how much do you want for this space? It was 80,000 square feet, went all the way to the Kroger at the time. I didn't even have a concept of how big 80,000 square feet was. I just said, how much you want? They said $18,000 a month. I hung up the phone, said, thank you very much, never gave it another thought. But about a year went by, and I woke up at 3 in the morning one day, and God clearly spoke to me, said, when you get up, go call Walmart. And I don't know what he did in the spiritual realm, but when I called, I was able to negotiate a deal for 10 cents a square foot, $666 a month for 80,000 square feet, right? And we got this space miraculously. In fact, the first thing we did is we had to hire animal trappers to trap all the animals living in the ceilings. And people lived with flea bites on their legs for 6 months. We couldn't get rid of the fleas, but God gave to us this space. And that, of course, is where we've been from June of 2003, 12 and a half years. I can't even believe it, 12 and a half years that we've been occupying this space. 10 of those, by the way, month to month. Can you believe that? At any time, they could have said, hey, you got 30 days and you're out. But God has protected us. God has enabled us and sustained us through this period of time. So like Israel then, God has called us out to become, as a people, a holy and a separate church, right? A holy, separate church. What does that mean? Well, it's like we're separate, we're unique, right? We have a unique story, a unique testimony. Not that we're the best church in town, the worst. We're just a church in town. But we've been called out to be a unique people with a unique story and a unique testimony and a unique calling and vision to this community. And so that's like Israel as well, this unique and special holy people. As it were, holy means separate, coming out to glorify God. And through it all, of course, God, as I've mentioned, has provided for us in every way. He's positioned us, but more than that, in these last 12 and a half years, in this space particularly, he's prepared us for this very moment. Again, not to cross a sea or a river, but to cross the street and take possession of that land. In fact, it's 10 acres, 100,000 square feet, right, of building on, and think about this, one of the very busiest, most prominent intersections in the entire state of Arkansas. I don't know if you know that, but it's in the top 3 busiest intersections in the entire state. And when you think about it, how amazing it is that God chose that land for us, that spot, because it is literally a crossroads for the community, for the city, for the county, and the state, literally. Because the highway department owns, cities have roads, counties have roads, and state have roads, and they all intersect right there on the 4 corners at University and Asher Colonel Glenn. And isn't it ironic that the diversity of a community, a city, a county, and a state, all crossroads right there in the unique story of Mosaic. And God's given to us that space, right? So throughout these 12 and a half years of waiting patiently, of wondering, not wandering, but wondering, if and when we'd ever take possession of that land, so to speak. Just like Israel, we've learned to walk, to work, and to worship God together as one. In fact, Harry and I were talking this morning, honestly, if somebody would have given us $3 million 5 years ago, let's say, or 8, we would have executed, we would have went across the street, but we would not have been ready. That's the honest truth. God has used this time to prepare us as a body for that move. We've faced moments throughout the last 12 and a half years, just like the people of Israel. We faced moments of uncertainty when we were not sure where the bread and water would come from. You know what I'm saying? Like how we would sustain this place in every way, where the provisions that had to come from God, where they'd come from, when they'd come at the last moment sometimes, and waited on him, apart from which him coming through, that is, we could not otherwise muster those resources, that bread and water to sustain this effort. So we faced those moments of uncertainty and come through, right? We've dealt with grumbling and complaining in the camp, right? Just like everything, some who were with us are no longer with us. We've dealt with that. We've overcome challenges to our leadership throughout that time, and we've experienced sin in our camp, and we as leaders have sinned, right? Because just like Paul said, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I've done my own share of complaining and grumbling, and we've all been there, right? But here's the deal. In spite of all that, we've been forgiven, right? We've extended forgiveness. We're still here. We're still kicking, right? And we're seeking to go on and sin no more, as it were, to grow and to learn and mature as a body. So God has used this time to prepare us. And in spite of all of that, like Israel, we prayerfully and we patiently and purposely persisted. Did you catch that? Prayerfully, patiently, and purposely persisted. And here we are right on the verge of this move. Never, I want you to know this, and I know Harry would agree with me, our leadership, never once through that entire 12 and a half year journey, right, of ups and downs, rights and wrongs, and left turns and right turns, and never once did we doubt God. Never once did our faith in God waver. Never once did our faith in the vision, this idea of this church, right, what it is, what's special about it, its vision, and never once did our faith waver in that vision, that mission. Never once did our faith waver in you, honestly. We've always believed. I was in Charlotte yesterday speaking over the last couple of days at a conversation on race for the whole city, and people just marvel, how can you bring so many diverse people together, ethnic diversity, economic diversity, political diversity, and all these people actually love each other. They actually walk with each other. They work with each other. They worship God. How does that happen? Only God, right? Only God. That's what you got to tell them. Ephesians 3:20 and 21, but we've done it because we've never doubted we could do it. Us. We've never doubted we could do it. We didn't know how it happened. We knew it wouldn't be easy. We've never doubted God, never doubted the idea of this church, never doubted ourselves that this could be done, and here we are, right? And because we persevered by faith then, we've seen God do miracles in our midst. We've seen that. From the very first person who was ever saved here, a Muslim man from Saudi Arabia, just 3 months after 9/11, our very first convert to Christ, as it were. 10 cents a square foot, as I mentioned here. No rent, by the way, for 18 months back in the day. We didn't even pay rent because the roof leaked so bad, like Niagara Falls, we didn't even pay rent for 18 months for 80,000 square feet, right? We've seen crime reduced by 10% in a 1 mile square radius of the building. We've attracted small business, helped to create jobs, generated tax revenue for the city, brought emotional uplift to this community, let alone all the good work of food distribution and immigration counseling and Immerse Arkansas and Teen Mops and all the other wonderful programs that come and flow through this church in Vine and Village. We've seen physical healings. Ophelia Lima was a woman who came here with stage 4 cancer, with just given weeks to live. She was healed through the prayers of people, and particularly Hispanics, right here in our midst. She had myeloma, totally healed. That story's told in our first book. Also, Alberto's mom recently, stage 4 cancer. He shared that. She's been totally healed. It's gone. They don't know what to do with it. Again, the prayers of people, seeing physical healings in our midst. And most recently, the 10 Fitness, right? The 10 Fitness coming into that space, helping us take that building from $1.5 million in value to $3.9 million in value. It's gone up in value $600,000 in just 8 or 9 months. 4,262 members of that gym in 4 months. 4,262. 10,000 bodies a week going in and out. 30 jobs created. The lights on in the parking lot, helping this church resurrect, as it were, and redeem 180,000 square feet of abandoned and underutilized space in a community. 55% of that property this church has taken off the market and brought to life to the glory of God, right? So we've seen these types of miracles that have happened, and because we persevered 10 Sundays from now, it's we who will have the privilege of entering a brand new facility, prepared just for us, as it were. We who will someday be able to tell our grandchildren of the day God delivered us out of the Walmart, right? He delivered us out of the Walmart. Deliver us out of the Walmart the day we marched across the street. By the way, God willing, good weather, we're going on a parade. We've got a parade permit. We're going to march down the street 5 Sundays from now. We're going to go over there and claim that building, kind of like Joshua. We're going to walk around 7 times and pray ahead of getting in there. We get a chance to do that because we're still here. We are the ones who, again, 10 Sundays from now, get to take possession of that land, of building that corner, and of an entire community we dearly love, the people of 72204. Like Pharaoh, 5 banks said no. Did you know that? 5 banks said no, but it only took 2 to say yes, and we got it done, right? Like Moses, I know I and Harry, others of us as leader, we've been totally strengthened through the years, through this long, hard journey by your prayers, your dedication, your commitment. You haven't quit on us. You haven't given up on us. You've stayed the course with us. You've held up our arms. And we'll forever be grateful for that, right? You know, it took Israel 40 long years to go what would otherwise have been an 11 days walk. Did you know that? What would have otherwise been an 11-day journey took them 40 years. It's taken us about 10 years to go 3 blocks. I think it's a modern-day equivalent. You know what I'm saying? 10 years just to go 3 blocks up the street, but we're going. So at the start of the year, this year, I heard this from God. Now, I don't want to say that lightly. Every now and then I get this impression, and years later I look back and go, that was God. Like when I woke up in the morning, he said, go call Walmart. I definitely heard him, right? So when I walked in the building early this year in January, this totally happened to me. I walked in, and I wasn't even thinking about the new building and moving and everything, but I guess it was just the start of the year, and I just walked in, and I felt this impression, and you know, almost like God speaking to you audibly in your spirit, and I heard him say, this is the year, this is the moment, go get it done. And I heard that, those exact words in that order. I shared with the elders 2 weeks later. I said, this is the year. I don't know what, but I know we've got to see this happen, and we prayerfully do it to reduce my salary from the church so we can hire more staff and to get ourselves in that building. And lo and behold, both those things have happened. We'll go in January 3rd, but we actually get the keys December 18th. So God got both those things done in that year, just like he said he was going to do, and we praise him for that, right? So when we do, that is when we get over there, and together, the idea is that when I heard God say, get this done, together we are getting this done, together we have gotten this done, together we will get this done and move across the street here in 10 weeks. And when we do, let there be no doubt, right? No other story to tell, no other words to share, to say than these. To God be the glory. Great things he has done. Amen. So with that said, Harry's going to share a little bit now with us from his perspective, some of these things. Tell us more about what's going to actually be required of us in the days ahead as we move from wanting or waiting to wandering to going and possessing, moving from renters, as it were, to owners of that space. Harry?
Thank you, Mark. It's so interesting how we have our different perspectives. We've talked a lot about this. And Mark chose the nation of Israel, the book of Joshua, moving across the river. And then as we talked about it, I was heading in that same direction, but then we thought, well, we really should give people paint a picture of who we can become once we cross the road. And so I chose as part of this morning to orient you about things we need to change our perspective on, about deepening who we are. I chose Ephesians chapter 3, and it's in that handout that I gave you. It's the prayer that I've been praying long before I ever arrived here. And it was one of the prayers that thrust me into ministry. And you'll see this morning it has a lot to do with establishing ourselves in this community as an owner, not a renter. Okay? So if you look at that passage, it says, for this reason I bow my knees before the Father. Now, what's the reason? We've talked about that several times over the course of the 13 years we've been here. But it actually goes back to chapter 3, where Paul starts the same thing, for this reason, but then he goes into the mystery, and we all know what the mystery is the fact that Christ came and died for all people, and that Paul was given this mission to bring Christ, the hope of the gospel, to the Gentiles. And so that's the reason he bows his knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. Now, here's the critical part, that you and I, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all of the saints, that's all of us together, what is the height and breadth and length, what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. That's a deep passage, isn't it? So what does that have to do with us moving? Well, let's look at a few of the words because they're critical in terms of understanding the picture we're going to paint as we move across the street. Number one, notice this. This is a process. We are discovering together, all the saints, this unknowable thing that Paul says is knowledge that surpasses knowledge. It surpasses your ability to understand it. But the word for comprehend just means that we should be eagerly receiving. We should be eagerly seeking that which we cannot really know, but that God can show us. Okay, and the way I always describe it, it's an ocean. And each day we can wander a little bit further into the depths of it, but we'll never fully understand it. But we are in process. Okay, now, the word for rooted, that actually means to become stable. It means to become constant or consistent. It means firmly fixed. Okay, we are not firmly fixed in this building. We haven't been, because at any point they could have called and said, you got 30 days to get out of here. But that's what that word rooted means. Now we have the opportunity as we move across the street to be firmly fixed in this community. The word for grounded means unwavering and established. Okay? So the picture is of, just like it says, a tree that's really solidly in there. No matter what happens, it ain't going anywhere. That's who we need to be. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, there's several things as I think about how do we become rooted and grounded in this community. Well, we were already well on our way, right? But now that we have a chance to actually own the property, we have an even greater opportunity to be exactly the picture that Paul painted for us. So I was thinking, well, what do we need to be more consistent in? So here's 3 or 4 things that as your pastor that I think that we need to be more consistent in as we go. Okay, number 1, prayer. You all know I'm the prayer guy, right? Nothing of any significance happens apart from prayer. I've not seen any spiritual breakthroughs apart from prayer. None of this about us moving would have happened without prayer. But guess what? We still need more prayer. And what I always tell our staff is, you always ask that question, you guys got time to pray? Well, no, who's going to say no to that, right? You got time to pray. And but I always say, listen, more prayer is better than less prayer. Some prayer is better than no prayer. Okay? And no, I don't think anybody here is satisfied with their prayer life. And so as we grow and mature, as we go across the street, let's just keep becoming more and more consistent in how we pray, in learning to pray, in spending more time in prayer, because that will help us individually become more rooted and grounded in our love of Christ. Second one, we need to become more consistent in our giving. Okay, now this is the part where, nobody likes to talk about giving. There's all kinds of stuff, even out on social media, about churches and money and giving and all of this stuff. But the reality is, giving is one of the greatest indicators of where your heart is. Christ himself said that. Okay, if he hadn't have said that, then it would be awkward. But he said it, so I'm going to preach it. Right? He says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Which I always just naturally think that's backwards, right? Because you would think, well, where your heart is, that's where your money's going to go. But he's going, no. It's the opposite. You want to see where your heart is, let me just look at your checkbook. Okay? And the best thing you could ever do if you want to encourage the staff of this church, be a part of this church, show your commitment to this church, is to be consistent in your giving. Consistency is the key. That's the best thing you could ever do. And then on top of that, help us when we are talking about the building and campaigns and all of that stuff. But really, the most important thing is to keep the operational, life-giving, ministry-oriented capacities of the church, keep that going really well and strong so that when we do move, none of that gets affected. So consistency in your giving. Start somewhere and then grow it from there. There will be no maturity. If you're growing spiritually, you will be growing in your willingness and ability to give, because things will become less important to you as you grow. So that's the second thing. The third thing is consistency. Remember, if we're going to be this rooted, where we are constant and consistent, then we've got to be more consistent in our attendance and our service. Okay, and hopefully you're going to hear a lot about that next week when we have children's ministries, Victor coming along. We just want people to be, if they say they're going to be there, let's be there. Okay? And consistency is what's going to determine how firmly rooted we become. And if you're a collective part of this body, when you're not here, we miss you. And it's not about what you receive, but what you give to the collective body. And I know it's hard because this is, again, it goes against our culture, right? To live like this means you have to be counterculture, but Christ was counterculture. And so as we continue to move across the street, develop consistency in all related to attendance and serving the body of Christ here at Mosaic. And then the last one is switching from a renter's mindset to an owner's mindset. Now, how many of you have rented before? Raise your hands. Yeah, you know the mindset of a renter compared to when you own, right? I made a list this morning. Think about this. A renter is always looking for the next best place to live. Are you not? You're always looking for the next best place to live. But an owner is always looking for a way to make their house a better home. That's a different mindset, and we all need to switch our mindsets from looking for the next best place to live to making our house a better home. A renter is always looking for a reason to move, right? Something goes wrong, or you're just making me want to move out of here. Whereas an owner is always looking for a reason to stay, right? One is very short term. How long is a lease? 1 year. Sometimes you get them for 6 months or even 3 months. What's the shortest you can get a loan for? 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. One is short term, one is long term. And when you have that long term perspective, it makes you want to invest a lot more where you are. Okay? So that's the idea we want you to keep having. You know, renters are always looking for a way to get by until something better comes along, whereas an owner is always looking for a way to increase the value of their homes. You know what I mean? How many of you, when you rented, something broke and the landlord wouldn't fix it, you would duct tape it? We've duct taped many things in this church. Duct tape is hereby outlawed at Mosaic, by the way. Because we don't want to do that anymore. We're going to move across the street. We're going to invest in that place. We're going to lay down some roots. And we're not going to live with that mindset anymore. There's nothing permanent about renting, but there's nothing temporary about owning. You know, those two things are opposites. And now that we have the opportunity to move, let's really bear down and just change the way we think about ministry, this church, and bear down and grow some deep roots for this community. Lastly, I was thinking that the renter always has a landlord to fall back on. You know what I mean? There's always somebody you can call. Hey, it's broken. The air conditioner's broken. It's a $3,000 air conditioner. But guess what? When we move across the street, we're the landlords. Landlords are us. and we no longer have anybody we can call. We're going to have to just deal with it ourselves. So we want all of you to become co-owners with us, co-heirs. That's exactly what that word means when it talks about us being rooted and grounded. We are supposed to become the people who receive that as heirs and as co-owners. And you're all invited to be that with us. And then what happens? Well, Paul says in verse 20, to him who is able to do far more abundantly all that we can ask or think according to the power that works within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations forever and ever. Amen. You know, last night or yesterday morning, the women had the journey gathering at my house. They said, man, you guys rocked. It's like, I don't even know how, there was probably 30, 40 women crammed into my house. They were singing, laughing, encouraging each other, crying. And I was in my office, which adjoins the living room, trying to work on this sermon. And I'm sorry, ladies, I had to eavesdrop. But let me tell you something. You guys encouraged me more than you will ever know. When I heard how much you love this church, how much you love each other, I just kept thinking, this is happening. We're discovering together what is the breadth and length and height and depth of the love of Christ. I was in near tears just sitting in there listening to the laughter and the tears and the worship and the encouragement. And let me just tell you, we're in process. And the ability for us now as we move over to actually land and to dig down deep and plant great roots, I just can't wait to see what happens. I hope you'll join us in that. Thank you.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's great. You know, what you think, just wrapping up here, and maybe we'll have a moment for question and answer, never know, but why wasn't it easier? You know, in both personally or even a corporate journey like this, it's easy to ask, why wasn't it easier? If God intended something, if God called out Israel, for instance, he says, I'm going to get you out of slavery, I'm going to move you out of Egypt, I'm going to give you the promised land, and then they went through all of what they did for 40 years. You think, why wasn't it easier, right? Why is the journey so difficult? If God called us out, why didn't he just make the way simple, right? And that's true for us corporately. It's also true for us in life, isn't it? Individually, we ask that question of God. Why? Why, God? Why the challenges? Why the hardships? Why the difficulties, right? We ask that as individuals. We might ask that over 12 and a half years in this space just to go 3 blocks up the street, right? Well, you think about it again from the nation of Israel to us. Why so difficult? To test our faith, right? To test our faith. Why so difficult? To mature our witness, right? When wine comes out, it sits for a while. It has to mature. It has to grow. It has to become a full-bodied bottle of wine, right? This is why it takes time. Why is it so difficult? To strengthen our resolve, right? To strengthen our resolve. To make us a resilient, a persistent, a patient, a prayerful people, a proven light to the nations, a credible city on a hill, a relevant people to which others look, see our good works, and glorify our Father in heaven, coming to know him as we do. That's why it takes so long, for God to do in us what he wants to do for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of his kingdom, so that others can come to know his grace, his mercy, his forgiveness, and his love, and through a credible and proven and relevant witness of diverse men and women walking, working, and worshiping God together as one. You know, make no mistake, moving to this new building is not an end. It's only another beginning. It's only another beginning. It's not a stopping point, brothers and sisters. It's a whole new starting point for us as a church, right? And as we've said from the beginning, it's never been about the building, but the building is a tool for us to do and to become all the kind of people and the kind of ministry, as Harry shared about, in permanence and ownership that is there. So God is about to give us, as he gave the nation of Israel, a possession, something to own, this new land, this new facility, a whole new day and mentality of excellence and pursuit of glory, of the glory of God. So you remember that phrase, right? To whom much is given, what? Much is required. And so as Harry said, I put a slide up that just summarized the 4 things that Harry said. Just, you might want to write these down, Martin, if you put them up. What are the 4 requirements then of this ownership? Harry said these, but I just want to restate them here as we move to close, right? Attend consistently. That means attend worship on Sundays. It is counterculture. Across the entire country, attendance is down in churches. Now, check this out. It doesn't mean that people are less committed to the church or less committed to Christ, as it were. Churches are finding people still give. We have online giving. So one of the measurements of a commitment, as Harry talked about, is your giving, right? Well, people still give even when they're not here. It used to be you couldn't collect money unless people showed up, right, to operate the church, to further mission. But through online giving, people can still be highly committed to a church, even if they're just there once a Sunday, right? But that's not good, and I'll tell you why. Because, and I should say this too, there's so much competition now on Sunday. You know, because of mobility, upward mobility, soccer tournaments and family. There's all these things that compete for what used to be, in a sense, a sacred time and space. People open their businesses now. It used to be people didn't do that, right? They waited till 12 or 1, but not anymore. So there's so many things, areas of our life that compete for that Sunday morning space. So you can still be committed to a church and not be there consistently. But let me tell you the reason you need to be here consistently, because it's not about you. See, if it's about you, you can watch our sermons online. You could watch Andy Stanley online. You could watch T.D. Jakes. You can get plenty of food, so to speak, to feed your spiritual nourishment, right? So, I mean, I hate to say it, but we say you don't necessarily need us on a Sunday morning to keep you going spiritually in our world of internet, etc., right? I hope you appreciate it. One thing that hurts, though, is we do have a vision. So, like, we don't just get up here and teach. We have a direction, a flow. And, of course, just like, parents or good shepherds, you want the whole body to be in that flow. Because it's not just about teaching, it's about vision. So that's what hurts when you don't watch us online after you miss or whatever. That's what we want as pastors. But even having said that, here's the deal. You need to be consistent in your attendance and keep this space sacred, because it's not about you, it's about others. So, for instance, when we come together, new people are always visiting. I won't call them out this morning, but people come. They check us out online. They wonder, is this a vibrant church, a credible church, a church for me, right? They need to see what we have. I mean, if it was business, if you will, they need to see our product. It's not business. But they need to see, is this really true, vibrant? If you get up every Sunday, or as you think about coming to church, you go, well, I really don't need to be there today because I. You see what I'm saying? I need you. We need you. Just like we think about you, we need you to think about others. Can we be a full body? Can we be worshiping and walking? And they see us interacting. I was asked in Charlotte this week, somebody said, now, if I was to come to your church, do I see a bunch of cliques? Do I see the blacks over in one corner and the whites over in a corner? No, I said, no, you don't see that. I said, I think you could ask anybody in our church, and they tell you the same thing. Amen? But they don't just need to see 2 or 3 or whoever felt like showing up this morning to represent that. They need to see the fullness, the vibrance, the numbers, the people that have bought into this vision, right? So that's why that's the consistency you need to attend a worship service. You need to think it's not about you, it's about others, right? It's about our collective witness to those that are visiting, to those that are desperate, to those that need what we offer, the love in Jesus Christ across ethnic and economic lines. So with that said, that's a new mentality. Attend consistently. Resist the urge to say what you think and do it for others, right? We do that. The second one here is serve weekly. That's not W-E-A-K-L-Y, right? That's serve weekly, all right? That's serve weekly. And when we go to this 2-service format, which, remember, there's going to be a 9 and a 10:45 service. The services will be an hour and 15 minutes, a little bit less than we've done. But the idea is, the phrase is kind of worship 1 hour and serve 1 hour. So why we say serve weekly, every single person, we really appreciate Soul Sisters, because part of their agenda this year, their mantra, if you will, is every woman has a place to serve on Sunday morning. Well, men, don't let them beat us out on that. Where are the men that'll lead on that? We should never, ever, 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 ever again have to close a classroom because we don't have enough workers, ever. We should never have any of the buckets that are needed on Sunday not flowing. We need to turn our volunteers away, not people who show up. You see what I'm saying? For classes, for children, for whatever it is, worship, We need to have our buckets full. We've got plenty of people. It's not just about coming and sitting. It's about coming and serving. So we're going to ask you towards the end of this year, when we look you eyeball, we're going to say, which hour are you going to worship, right? Is it 9 or 10:45? And which hour and where are you going to serve? Children, we got a brand new full-time children's pastor coming today at 3 o'clock. She arrives, Maria Chung, arrives here today at 3 o'clock. We have waited 14 and a half years to have a full-time children's pastor. God's provided this year. Still have Eric and Tiffany and their great work, their credibility, who they are, their leadership, but we're beefing that up to go across the street. So particularly children and Kai with young people and students here on Sunday, they need everyone engaged, right? And so we need to do that. So this is all part of that Sunday morning consistency. It's just a 3.5 hour block of your time, but it's about serving the body, serving others, serving the body, and demonstrating our witness that way. Then, of course, as Harry mentioned, giving faithfully, right? Faithfully, consistently, etc. And lastly, love abundantly. All of this, we could have put the word love more abundantly, give more faithfully, serve more each week, right? Attend more consistently. But it's all about stepping up in these 4 particular areas as we move from being mere renters to owners. In fact, in the passage that Harry's sharing today in Ephesians chapter 3, again, as he said, this is a critical passage where Paul is explaining that the mystery of the church on earth as it is in heaven is diverse people walking, working, worshiping God together as one, in order to present a clear and consistent and credible message of God's love for all people in a world and a society. In fact, in Ephesians 3:10, I just want to call you this. This is before the passage where Harry was sharing. Paul actually offers, it's a whole prayer, but there's 3 big sections in there. And he says that this mystery, Gentile inclusion, and otherwise all Jewish church, all Jewish gospel, all Jewish kingdom of God, this gospel of Gentile inclusion, he calls it in Romans 16:25. He said, the reason we want the church to look and feel and be like this is so that, verse 10 of Ephesians 3, the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through the church. And that's not talking about eternity. That's not talking about the church on earth. That's not talking about the capital C church in Little Rock. That's talking about a very specific local church in the city of Ephesus. He says, so that the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through the church to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly places. Now, what you may not know, and then he goes on, of course, to talk about the height, the breadth, the length, the depth of God's love, and as Harry said in Ephesians 3:20, God is able to do exceedingly abundantly. It's all in the context of building a healthy, multi-ethnic, and economically diverse church. When he says, I want you to know the height, the breadth, the length, the depth of God's love, the reason for that is because maybe you go to a black church and they got the height of God's love, but they don't have the breadth, the length, the depth. Then you go to a Korean church, maybe they got the depth, but they don't got the height. You see, this is exactly what he's saying. It's like a prism. He wants us to see and feel and know all those different angles that each of our cultures, our backgrounds, our experiences bring to the table. He wants us to enjoy the taste of a tomato, of lettuce, of onions. He wants the whole salad in the room. He wants you to taste it. He don't want you to put your fork in a tomato and you've just drenched the whole thing in ranch sauce. You ever had a salad like that? You see what I'm saying? You taste the tomato, it's like ranch sauce. You taste the lettuce, like ranch sauce. See, you got to get rid of the sauce so we can taste every flavor of this thing like a prism and experience all the breadth, the length, the depth, the height of God's love. This is exactly what he's saying, and I wanted to prove it to you in closing. And that's why I brought up Ephesians 3:10. When he says, so the manifold wisdom of God will be displayed through this kind of church, guess what the word manifold means? Did you know? I'm looking it up right here in the Greek. You say this, polypoikolos. I could put it on the speaker for you. Do you know what the word manifold means? Right here out of the Koine Greek dictionary, you can look it up yourself, Blue Letter Bible online. It means this, marked with a great variety of colors. So the manifold wisdom of God, the great variety of colors, that through this manifold wisdom of God, his glory will be displayed. The gospel, the church, the kingdom of God is not just for one kind of people. It's for all kind of people. The manifold wisdom, the multicolored wisdom of God. So all that's to say is, as we close here, the love abundantly, this is what that love is rooted in. Our love for one another beyond the distinctions of this world that so often and otherwise divide. This is what God is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond what you could ever ask, imagine, or think. And it's what he's doing in taking us across the street to become owners, not mere renters. For indeed, as I said before, and here's the dean, James, I think we're going to close in a song. You guys can come on up. But here's the deal. As I said, it's not a stopping point. It's a starting point. It's not the end. It's only a new beginning. And here's why. We have a song that we're going to close with to remind us of this. Because even when we go across the street, greater things are yet to come. Greater things are still to be done in this city.